Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening.
Continuing our investigation of the Gateless Barrier, the Wumen Guan, Case 33, Mazu, not mind, not Buddha. A monk asked Mazu, "What is Buddha?" Mazu said, "Not mind, not Buddha." Wumen says, "If you can see through this clearly, your Zen training is complete." Wumen's verse, "If you meet a swordsman in the street, give him a sword. Don't offer a poem unless you meet a poet. When you speak to others, say only 3/4. Never give it all out in detail." So here we have Mazu again, who we just had only a couple cases ago. This is case 33. So in case 30, we have a story called Mazu, Mind is Buddha. And in this one, a monk named Dame asked Mazu, "What is Buddha?" So we have the same question here. What is Buddha? I think Terry is going to hang around afterwards and ask me this question too. So I'll have to come up with something a little longer than Mazu did, I think, because we want to put it on the website. And that would be really boring. So the first time, Dame asked Mazu, "What is Buddha?" Mazu said, "Mind is Buddha," or "This very mind is Buddha," or "Ordinary mind is Buddha." Mind is Buddha. Just this mind. And so, as is the case in a oral tradition or in a spoken culture and in a community culture, we can only understand and know that this famous interaction between Dame and Mazu became a story that was told around the community. That Dame had this interaction with Mazu. He asked him what Buddha was, and Mazu told him it was just this mind. So, sometime later, it's said that after this interaction, after Dame had sort of an insight into this interaction, Dame went off onto the other side of the mountain, moved into a hermitage, and sat there for a long time. And people from the monastery, no doubt, would probably go visit this old monk, not even necessarily an old monk, but more experienced monk who had gone off into a solitary retreat to practice with this mind is Buddha. And so, likely, sometime later, a clever monk went to Mazu after this story of this mind is Buddha, or mind is Buddha, has been percolating and going through the monastery for some time. Everybody knows mind is Buddha. Everybody knows Mazu teaches that mind is Buddha. And so this clever monk goes and he says, I don't know, when I think about this, I always think, I've heard it said that he says this. I want to go check it out. I'm going to ask him. So maybe he goes to sort of like throw a softball over the plate just to watch. Sort of he wants to see how this is delivered. Or maybe he asks because he's heard it, mind is Buddha, but he doesn't get it. Like he's like, okay, this is supposed to be a really profound statement. I don't get it. Maybe it's the way he says it. So I'm going to go ask him. So this monk, this guy doesn't have a name, unfortunately. But there you go. He goes and asks Mazu, what is Buddha? And Mazu doesn't say mind is Buddha. In fact, he says, not mind, not Buddha. So, if we take this into the original Chinese or Japanese, we have, I don't think, putai. Anyways, the Japanese would be mushin, mubutsu, right? So it's not just it isn't this or it isn't that. When we take it into the Japanese, or even if we look at it from English, we have to really understand that there's a word that's being used twice in this statement, and that's important. So, mu. And a couple of Tuesdays ago, I spoke pretty extensively on this. Mu, emptiness, or without, or not, or this fundamental negation, and what that's pointing to. And that fundamental negation, that fundamental emptiness of self-nature, separate nature, soul, essence, permanent and lasting reality is the fundamental point of what this case is pointing at. This is a wonderful case because as Zen practitioners, I think that many of us come to Buddhism or come to Zen out of contempt, maybe, or out of a cynicism, or out of a revulsion to maybe materialism is one thing, or idolatry, or deism, or any of these kinds of things where we as human beings, or individuals as human beings, or cultures, or communities take up objects, or people, or things, or even ideas as holy, or special, or precious, or real, even just this real. And so from when we first come to Buddhism and we hear about this concept of anatman, or no self, or shunyata, emptiness, we say, oh, this is great. We say, oh, wonderful. There's no big God, and there's no soul, and there's no heaven and hell, and good and bad, and all these kinds of things that we attach to, we take as being real and fixed and permanent and absolute. And Buddhism kind of undermines those. And even this thing that we call I, fundamentally, arguably, this thing that I call I, this self, also falls into this impermanent, no fixed, lasting, separate essence or entity. And we say, oh, so wonderful. And I think it's always been the case in Buddhism that this is the way that people first come to practice, is out of a wanting to, or disappointment or disillusionment with the taking things as permanent and then over and over again sort of being led or walking or experiencing that relationship or that object or that anything, just it's not permanent, it's not lasting, it doesn't exist outside of a very transient, temporary manifestation. Even ideas, even concepts, they don't last. And what this teaching, Mazu, is pointing to here is that one of our very natural human tendencies, I think, is that we're constantly searching for that. Even when we're, we put on robes and we take vows and all this kind of stuff, we're constantly putting out this sort of fishing line for the thing that's lasting or permanent or fixed or real or true or good, or if you fill it in. Whatever it is that you yourself, as you examine yourself, are so desperately seeking, this resting place, this finish line, this doneness. And what Mazu is pointing to here is that when we take up Buddhism, one of the common questions is this: what is Buddha? Who is Buddha? And so we can look at it as the sort of historical, relative, in that sense, where we can say, who is the Buddha? The Buddha is a man who was born in approximately 563 BC, and he lived in sort of like the northeastern part of India in what is now Nepal, and he was a guy who did a bunch of teachings, and he became really awakened, and yada yada yada. And if we fixate on this is what Buddha is, then we make a mistake, because we say, well, then he was the Buddha, and he was something that was very special and rare, and I am not the Buddha, and so the Buddha becomes an object of our mind that we can fixate, and we can hang on to, and we can project onto, and we can have all kinds of opinions and ideas about. But the one thing that it is when we do that is it's not really connected to me. It's not related to me. It's something that's outside of me and outside of this immediate experience. And so in Zen in particular, but in all of Buddhism, it's the Buddha's very teaching that to understand the Buddha this way is to really make a mistake. This is why the Buddha, even in his own lifetime, we have this term that we chant, Tathagata, right? We talk about it in Torei Zenji's vow, and in all of the sutras in which the Buddha is speaking. When he refers to himself as Tathagata. And Tathagata is a compound word which has two components, Tathagata and Tathagata. And Tathagata means thus coming, the one who comes. And Tathagata means the one who goes. So when the Buddha was referring to himself, he was actually even then pointing out that what the person who is speaking right now is not a person. It's an activity. It is a person who is simultaneously arising in this moment and simultaneously dissolving in this moment. There is no person to point to. There is no Siddhartha. There is no Shakyamuni. There is no world-honored one. It is only Tathagata, this activity of coming and going. So another way that we can understand Buddha, this word Buddha, means the one who is awake. And so the second way that we look at Buddha in our practice, in the context of practice in particular, is the Buddha is somebody who is awake. And so it might not be like wonderfully awake and all. It's just they're a person who we can look to for guidance. So one of the ways that we understand Buddha, like when we're talking about the three refuges, taking the three refuges, the Buddha is represented by the teacher. So we say we take refuge in the Buddha. We are going to have a relationship with a teacher, someone who is awake, so that we can learn from them, not just from what they say, but from what they do and how they interact with us and with objects and with environments. And the third way that we understand Buddha in our tradition is the one who is awake is our own nature. And it's the nature of all things in this vast cosmos. It is, maybe we could say that the awakened nature is the positive manifestation of Mu. So where we have the absolute minus of emptiness, all things melted down into shapeless oneness, as those things manifest, as they realize what they are and where they're coming from and where they're returning to, this is the manifestation of Buddha nature, awakened nature, or the manifestation of Buddha. So there's a wonderful threefold way of understanding Buddha. And in Zen in particular, our emphasis is, I guess we could say, well, I don't know. I guess we could say the emphasis in our own realization is placed on this third sort of absolute Buddha. Our objective is not to worship the historical Buddha. Our practice is not to demean ourselves, I guess, to a sort of present teacher, and to belittle ourselves and think that, oh, the teacher is something better than me, or bigger than me, or different than me. Our practice is to realize and manifest our own nature, our own Buddhahood, our own the one who is awake. There is no other one. And our relationship with the historical Buddha, his teachings, his life and example, the way that we can use this is to simply allow it to inform and guide and lead us to our own nature, to our own Buddhahood. And our relationship with the sort of contemporary Buddha, our teacher, is also pointed at this realization of our own wisdom, our own awakening, our own Buddhahood. There's nowhere else to find it other than in our own life, our own manifestation, our own experience, our own realization. So Dame asked Mazu, what is Buddha? And Mazu said, mind is Buddha. He's pointing to this truth, or this lesson that I've been going on about at some length, that our most common interactions, our every breath and our every movement and our every transaction and our every relationship, this is the content of Buddha. There is nothing outside of it. And if we are looking outside of it, we're missing it entirely. And this character, Shin, this is what it points to. It's not just mind, and it's not just heart. It's the very fabric of all things in this cosmos. It's everything in this cosmos. And Mazu is pointing to this and saying, all of this, your most natural experience, your most natural relationship, this is the manifestation of Buddha. Absolute Buddha. The second monk, so we have this is wonderful. I've been talking for a little while now, and all of these ideas have come up. And the historical Buddha, and Tathagata, and Shunyata, and Shin, heart, mind, all of these things have come up. But just like anything, if we're not able to look through what this word is pointing to, because one of my favorite sort of jokes, as you all know, during sesshin is about 4 days into a person's first session. I'll usually say, so when you go back home and someone says, how was the retreat, or what did you get out of the retreat, what are you going to say? And usually the person says, oh. Because the experience of sesshin, the experience of even touching, even glimpsing our own nature, is something that is beyond description. It's utterly experiential, and to describe it, even poorly, takes a pretty significant amount of thought and reflection and care. And then even then, usually the people that we're trying to describe that to look at us like we're crazy, or they don't get it. And yet we try. And all of Buddhism, in fact, I would argue all religions, all of them, all of the idols and all of the robes and all of the sutras and hymns and chants and all of this stuff are all poor attempts to point to, direct people to, intimate, describe, explain something that is fundamentally beyond explanation. People write books, and then people take the books and think somehow that this book captures the mystery, and then they put it in a fancy place and they put a glass case over it, and if you touch the book improperly or maybe put it on the floor, you've done some big harmful thing. And from the perspective of Zen, this is crazy, because you can't catch the essence. You can't describe or confine or contain or hold this activity, this Dharma activity, in a book or in a story or in a poem or in a dance or in a word. You can't contain it. And so the idea of trying to do that, or much less being angry with someone for damaging something that has been done like that, it's kind of crazy. And this is what Mazu is pointing to in this second case, when the second monk comes and says, what is Buddha? This is a monk who's heard that mind is Buddha. And so he's coming to hear this description of Buddha, which I suspect is an idea in his head. He wants to know what this thing called Buddha is. Maybe so he can get some of it. Maybe so that he can become it. Maybe so that he can get closer to it or understand it better. But it doesn't really matter which one of those circumstances it is. The monk is holding Buddha as an object, or as a thing, as a external, as a permanent, as a self. Likewise, the monk is also coming to understand mind. What is this mind? And we, I think, Western people, generally, this word shin, I always talk about when these things come. It's often translated as mind, but it also means heart. So you can always say heart. So not your heart, not Buddha. So I want to understand my heart. What's the heart of this matter? What is? So if my heart is Buddha, I want to understand my heart, and I want to understand the Buddha. And Mazu sees this question, sees these two objects, and objects generally being held by this monk. And he says, Mu. The heart is empty. Buddha is emptiness. The heart is emptiness. The Buddha is emptiness. So if we want to understand Buddha, what is Buddha? We have to go back to this origin. We have to go back to this formless origin. Letting go of our fixed idea of mind or heart, letting go of our fixed idea of Buddha, but fundamentally letting go of the fixed concept of a thing, of a soul, of a self, of an entity, of a object, of a world, of a universe, the idea that there is something that is fixed and lasting and permanent. And this is a little bit, I have to be very careful here, because this Zen, this concept of shunyata, emptiness, or mu, is not to be equated with nihilism. It doesn't mean that nothing exists. If you step that way, then I'll smack you with this book and say, oh, it didn't exist. And you'll say, ow. And I'll say, but it didn't exist. Things exist, but there is no permanence to them. There's no lastingness to them. There's no separateness to them. There's no permanence to them. There's no entity to them. They are made up of elements that have come together in certain combinations, and they exist together for a while as long as, in Buddhist terms, their karma connects them. The activity or the energy, I guess if you want to use physics, it's like when the connecting energy lasts, they stay together, and when it's exhausted, they don't. They come apart. Our bodies last as long as our organs and everything sort of works together, and then once systems start to break down, there's not the energy to maintain them anymore. They don't. They break apart. They dissolve, and very rapidly, returning to formlessness, or returning to shunyata, emptiness. This case is really short and very simple, but Wumen, who's usually quite he can be pretty wordy, or he can be very patronizing, or he can be very critical, or he says only one thing, which is very Wumen. He says, if you can see through this clearly, your Zen training is complete. Well, it's pretty easy. All you got to do is just see through this. But even that's a trap, because we get the idea of complete. He's just set out the perfect trap for us. This is really hard, and I've got to keep doing this. But one day, I'll be finished my Zen training, and I'll be a Buddha, and I'll be all awake. And he just lays it out there. Says, oh, just this one. If you can do just this one, you'll be complete. And we all say, oh, I've got to get this one. And Wumen goes, I got you. So just be careful with Wumen. Just be careful with the Buddha, and just be careful with this not mine, not. But there's a great story, actually, that after this case came out, after this interaction came out between Mazu and this monk, and the teaching around the monastery started to be, what is Buddha? Not mind, not Buddha. And so everyone was walking, oh, not mind, not Buddha. Oh, very deep. And so a monk went around the mountain to where Dame was in his hermitage. And they went to visit him, and he said, oh, yeah, how are things over at Mazu's place? And the monk says, oh, well, he doesn't teach that mind is Buddha anymore. Dame says, what? He says, yes, now the teaching is not mind, not Buddha. And Dame said, well, I don't care what the teaching is now. I still say mind is Buddha. And then he goes. The monk goes back around and talks to Mazu about this interaction. And I think I explained the last time that Dame, the da is bai. Bai is plum. And that's da. The da is bai. So when he comes around, this monk says, well, I went and visited Dame and told him that you're not teaching mind is Buddha anymore, that the teaching is now not mind, not Buddha. But he still says that mind is Buddha. And Mazu reportedly said, the plum is getting ripe. So the verse, this is I've always really loved this verse because it really gets to a real fundamental, it's very important, particularly as practitioners. There is a teaching of skillful means in our tradition. And we all grew up in I think we all grew up in sort of North American, European culture. I don't know. I actually don't know. So, but I'm going to assume that. And we are very proselytizing in our views and in our explorations. We're very sharesies about everything. And oftentimes it's regardless of whether the person is interested in what we're talking about or not. I did some study of the Theravadan Sravakayana tradition teachings, and one of the major writings in the Sravakayana teaching is the Vinaya, which is the code of rules, and there's rules about everything. How to wear your robe, and how to eat your food, and how to do this, that, and the other thing. And one of the most fascinating, well, not one of the most fascinating, but one of the rules that just baffled me at the beginning was you should never teach the Dharma to somebody who is riding on an elephant unless they're sick. And I was like, what the hell is that all about? And there's a great website called Access to Insight, and it has the whole Vinaya there. And what's great about it is that it has sort of all of the stories that went into the making of the rules. Because one of the Buddha's first rules was we shouldn't have a rule without there being a need for a rule. And so every time there's a rule made, there's a story that goes with the rule and how it was made. And so the story is, and this makes a lot of sense, is that there would be monks traveling along the road, and then people would ride by either on horses or on elephants, wealthy people, and they would see these mendicants going by, and they would ask them, they'd say, like, what's your teaching all about? And the point of it is, in that rule is, if that person is unwilling to dismount, if that person is unwilling to bring themselves down to an equal level with the person that they're questioning, if that person isn't coming to a place where they're seriously questioning with an attitude of respect and care, then you don't answer them. You don't engage in that. And so, unless they're sick, because if they're sick, then they can't, right? So that makes a lot of sense. But likewise, this verse is really pointing to this care with how we go about trying to express the Dharma, or relate to the Dharma, or exchange the Dharma, or share the Dharma. Because particularly in the beginning, particularly when we're having these first initial experiences of meditation, it's so easy to just blah, blah, blah. It's like we go to a party and people say, oh, I hear you're into Zen. What's that all about? And maybe they are off the horse, but we are not concerned about what they're taking in. We're not concerned about what the sort of their world mindset is like. We just go from where we're at, blah, 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 blah. So Wu Men makes a very simple verse here, and he says, if you meet a swordsman in the street, give him a sword. It's very simple. When you see a person who is an expert in a particular tool, relate to them through that tool. Connect with them in that way. Meet them where they stand. Don't offer a poem unless you meet a poet. Does that make sense? I mean, this is pretty straightforward. When we're I remember when I was in high school, I hated poetry for a little while in the first couple of years because I just didn't understand it. It made no sense to me. And then about grade 11, I had my heart broken for the first time. And of course, that's when poetry started to make a lot more sense. And so I'd write these poems. Oh, jeez. And then I'd go up to my father and say, oh, I wrote this poem, you want to hear it? And he'd be like, no. And I'd read it anyway, right? And then I would be upset because he didn't get it. So that whole exchange is, if you are trying to manifest, if you're trying to express, if you're trying to connect with someone through the practice or through the expression of Dharma, this needs to be done. We have to relate in a way which is mutually beneficial. And even if we look at this, these two cases of Mazu, is he teaching something different? Is he teaching a different thing from the first case to the second case? I don't think he is. I think he's pointing to the same thing, but he's pointing to two different people in two different environments. In fact, the second circumstance has been affected. It's like a sequel. It's like if everyone's seen the first one, you can't just keep rehashing that first act, right? So he's got to bring it differently. He's got to make it different. He's got to respond appropriately and spontaneously to the circumstance that's in front of him. When you speak to others, say only 3/4. Never give it all out in detail. And this is one of the, particularly in teaching, this is always one of the fundamental rules, and there's lots of legends and stories about this that, whenever you hear one of these teachers talk about losing their eyebrows, the idea is that someone who's really wise grows these big bushy eyebrows. And so if you see pictures of old Zen teachers, they've all got their shaved heads, but they've got these big honking eyebrows, right? And the story is that the value of being a teacher is in pointing the way, but allowing the student to actually do it. And that if you're overly helpful, if you give it away too fully, then your eyebrows are going to fall out, and everyone's going to know that you're not a good teacher, that you're just a softie that gives everything away. Now that's the one side, but I think the other side is simply that, at some point you have to realize that all you can do is intimate. All you can do is point. All you can do, it's like the story, the finger pointing at the moon. All you can do is indicate. And the person that you're in relationship with needs to make the jump, needs to make the connection for themselves. There's a great story about Zaozu, Joshu, the silver-tongued Joshu, where somebody asks him a question, and he, in typical form and very succinct, crystal clear, kind of points it. And the other teacher says, oh, that's really great, but even that's only like 80%. And this is the point, is that this dharma, this activity, this cosmos, is not something that you're separate from. It's not something that stands outside of you. Awakening is not something that you have to go somewhere and try to find or get or possess or buy or have or all of these things. This is your natural sort of birthright. You come with it, but we're not aware of it. So when we look to teacher, that can be dangerous if we think that we're going to get it from the teacher. Or when we go to a fancy place, particularly with a teacher, and we think that our awakening or our wisdom is connected somehow or dependent upon a specific place or a specific teacher or a specific relationship, we make a mistake. And our tendency as human beings is to invest in this over and over and over again. And it's not just about dharma. It's not just about wisdom. When we're talking about these monks, and assuming that they've shaved off their heads and they've given away all their stuff and they've become monks and they're pursuing this practice, that's what it's fundamentally talking about, is awakening, realization, all of those kinds of things. But the truth is, our tendency to impute permanence and lasting goes far beyond dharma. It's in happiness, in satisfaction, in success, in fulfillment, in healthiness. We're constantly taking those things and placing them outside of ourselves, placing them with others or with environments or with circumstances or with conditions of a certain kind or amounts of money or physical objects. We're doing it 24/7 all the time. And we're saying, I'll be happy when I have this, or when I do that. I'll be fulfilled when I have this, or when I do that. I'll be complete. I'll have love. I'll be whatever. And we do it all the time. And so what this case is pointing to is that satisfaction, that happiness, that fulfillment, that ease, that whatever, that love, it isn't something that we're going to find in a thing, because there are no things fundamentally. It's not something we're going to find in another person, because there are no people fundamentally. It's not something we're going to find in an environment, because there is no environment fundamentally. There's nowhere that you can go. There's nobody that you can be with. There's nothing that you can have that is lasting, fixed, permanent. Nothing. Not mind, not Buddha. If we're looking for this realization, if we're looking for this love, if we're looking for this completion, if we're looking for this satisfaction, if we're looking for this fulfillment, there is nowhere else for us to find it than in this very moment, in this activity of our lives as we're living it right now, Tathagata, thus coming, thus going. This case, this comment, if you can see through this clearly, then your Zen training is complete. This is absolutely true. But it only lasts this moment. And then in the next moment, we put it outside of ourselves again. And our practice is to continuously come back to this. Continuously come back to this, see through this clearly, right view. See through when we've fixated, see through when we've attached, see through when we've placed it outside of ourselves, when we've put it somewhere where we're just searching after it outside of ourselves, looking for the environment, the object, the relationship. When we see through it, in that moment, when we see through our fixation, when we see through the self that we've imputed in whatever it is that we're looking at, then in that moment we are complete. Our training is complete. We are the manifestation of awakening. In that moment we are satisfied. In that moment we are fulfilled. In that moment we are happy. In that moment we have all of the love in the cosmos. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to do. And in the next moment, again, we're looking. Again, we're seeking. And this is our practice. Hopefully I haven't given it all out in detail. My eyebrows are already very thin. So thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.